Is this a new thing in home video where you can watch the movie before it's done making it?
There is a theory about that with time travel where like things will get faster and faster to the point where you can complete it before it's done. And that's kind of where time travel comes into effect.
It doesn't make any sense to me.
I know.
But I guess time travel doesn't make any sense. It's funny you say time travel.
I know, like that was complete coincidence.
Because I think this episode was about time travel.
Oh, yes, it was. And I am so mad about this episode, but we're going to get into it. So as you know, this is the Measure of an Episode, where it is our continuing mission to explore what makes Star Trek proper Star Trek and not just Star Trope. I'm Jonathan.
Oh, I love that.
Thanks. I don't.
Oh.
I mean,
and I'm Paul.
You know, great.
What? Great?
Great play on word, but yeah, it's great it's great to have you on the show, Paul. Thanks for being here today.
What are we talking about? Oh, the criteria by which we judge these episodes.
Yep.
Number one, is there science fiction inherent to the plot, explored in the plot? Very important. Number two, is that science fiction unique or novel in some way? By the way, I used to say novel or unique in some way. At some point, I switched it. Yeah, no, interesting, right?
Yeah, I wonder why. I wonder when.
Interesting. Yeah,
I'll find that episode. Be like, this
said
is it.
No one ever. And number three, is there a moral or ethical dilemma in the episode? I'm Paul.
And I'm Jonathan. And this week we went back to Strange New Worlds. We're a little bit behind. Yeah, we're 2 episodes behind, and we're just going to fall farther and farther behind. But we will get through all of it. And the episode was Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, which I'm not really sure how that relates to the plot. But La'an travels back in time to 21st century Earth to prevent an attack which will alter humanity's future history and bring her face to face with her own contentious legacy.
You know, that's basically the MacGuffin of the episode.
Right.
We thought it was going to be a time travel episode, but really it's not. It's not about time travel at all.
No, it's not.
That's just a reason for her to get together with Kirk.
In a way that doesn't get her together with Kirk.
Right.
Yeah.
So they can reset the episode later.
Yeah.
Or reset for the next episode.
Right.
Because everything's got to be back to normal.
Yeah.
Although Pike was on vacation again this episode.
So behind the scenes, he just recently had a baby, and he asked, can he have some time off at the start of the filming to spend some time with his family? And they said yes, and that's why he wasn't in the first episode. That's why the second episode was fairly light with him, and that's why he wasn't in this one. I think they just kind of shuffled the episodes around and probably edited scenes where he would have been in to give him that time off.
I wonder if it was always Kirk. Was it always Kirk that she was going to fall in love with?
Oh, good question. Like, would it have been Pike, maybe? Like Pike
I guess it makes more sense that they wouldn't necessarily connect her and Pike together as a potential love interest. That seems, we want to keep him open, available, as it were.
Right. But would it have been somebody else? Or, I mean, the time travel aspect of it makes it very simple for it to be Kirk instead of Pike, but it also might have been before Kirk's traveling, or his time as captain. So it could have been somebody completely different.
I was very disappointed with this episode.
Okay, elaborate, because I was too, but for probably like totally different reasons.
Okay. Well, so I was actually fine with it until they get back and go clothes shopping. And then I thought to myself, okay, I will tolerate a very little amount of this fish out of water stuff. Because, not necessarily because they did it badly, but they've done it so much. Just in Star Trek, how many times have we seen this type of episode? Whether it's in the movies or in the show. Like, I think every show has some sort of fish out of water
time travel thing.
Travel thing where they go back in time and have to blend in and have to deal with this thing called money, where they exchange money for food or money for housing.
Yeah. I did like, I kind of talked about this in the last episode. I did like that they were able to set up something from, I think, the first episode with Carol Kane coming in and have it pay off a little bit here.
I forgot about her because she hasn't been in the show until now.
All right. But again, it's one of those things where because of how they wrote it, she could have had like a little knowing moment with La'an if she was in episode 1. Oh, she wasn't. Yeah, they went to go save La'an from whatever in episode 1. Okay. But it would have been nice if they had some kind of moment between the two of them, kind of like a Guinan thing, where she knew something that La'an didn't. And then after this episode, she's like, now you know what I'm talking about.
Can I say something about Carol Kane
real
quick? I don't know what her character's name is. I keep forgetting.
Right.
They don't say it enough.
Right.
They haven't said it enough out loud. Actually, everybody's name in this is not conducive to remember. Like the doctor's name is very strange, and I'll never remember it. Anyway.
Well, they gave you a bit of a what's mnemonic? Yeah, they gave you a bit of a mnemonic for number 1, Una.
Yeah, that has a lot.
Why couldn't they have done that with everybody?
It's also an easy thing to remember.
Pike's first name is Captain.
Hello, Captain Pike. So, Carol Kane. So, here's the thing about her. I really wanted her character to be that person who because she on the outset she feels very like drunk and wacky and kind of not all there. Mm-hmm. But what I wanted there to be was that moment where she needs to show up, and she shows up and she's like super smart or knows something that nobody else knows or has some sort of contribution to the scenario that no one else could have given.
Right. And
in spite of her behavior and her weird accent. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that happens. I think she's just a wacky, crazy person who somehow has lucked her way into being in the scenarios that she's in.
Well, so far. Yeah. And it was frustrating because yes, it was somebody where she was like, oh my gosh, I do know someone, but they didn't need it to be her. They could have just seen, I don't know, like whatever. The writing could have been altered in a way where they found the watch. Like it didn't need to be found at her place. But I did like the line where she said, I thought your archaeology department was going to be an archaeology department.
I know. But see, I wanted there to be something that justified her being thousands of years old, right? Like something that gives her that leg up that is interesting. But so far, not so much, right?
Well, yeah, so far it just seems like she's just kind of being selfish and just living. Like she's not doing anything with having this long lifespan. She said, said she's like has to evade the cops or something.
It feels like she's on the lam and has to continue to kind of hop around anonymously because people are looking for her. That's what it feels like.
Yes.
It may not be that, but I mean, it's hard to tell. I'm waiting until we get more information.
Right. And that's fair.
Yeah. But let's jump back for a second.
Yeah.
Remember when I said when we were talking about Picard last week that the Titan is one of the slowest ships in Starfleet because it just seems like they were just dragging their ass out of the nebula to try and go into warp. And you're just like, ugh, because it just feels like they're going 50 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. I loved it. In the first shot of this episode, there was debris or something. Like as the Enterprise was traveling through space, there was stuff whipping by. And you're like, oh, they're going fast. It's not just them looking like they're static sitting there in space. It made it feel like it was big, and it made it feel like it was really cooking. Mm-hmm. That's what I meant. Mm-hmm. That's exactly what I meant,
right.
And they did it.
Right. And yeah, and I don't know if it's a difference between like Strange New Worlds is kind of being its own thing, and Picard is kind of like, well, we have to follow the rules that we had before. But even with that, there was the episode where they were leaving that asteroid belt or the planet debris or something. Remember, and they had to fly it by hand because the computer wouldn't fly it better.
Which I don't believe.
Right.
Immediately I'm thrown out.
Right. And they bring out the joystick, I think. And I think Picard was the one who had to lead them out because he trusted his gut or something. Maybe it was Data.
So dumb. Yeah, I hated it. I hated that whole section.
Right. But you remember the episode.
No, I remember the episode.
And even there.
I think it was called Booby Trap.
Oh, I think
that
you're
episode
right.
was called Booby Trap.
Yeah.
Maybe just been booby.
We could just make this about boobs. That's fine.
Star Trek Booby.
Whole series about it. But even in that episode, like they were kind of crawling along because they couldn't move fast. But even there, they were still navigating the ship through this debris, and it was moving faster, I feel like, than the Titan was in the Nebula.
Well, and also, they didn't give the order to slow down, right? Captain, not Picard, who's the other guy? Captain Frakes said, let's get out of here as fast as you can. Punch it. And then it's like, doop-de-doo.
Right.
They ran over many Donald Ducks. Yes, that's exactly what happened.
I mean, they have said that the ships are duck powered, right?
Well, maybe they upgraded. Maybe the upgrade when you get a new Enterprise is you go from duck to dolphin.
Right. To bring it all back, they went to Carol Kane and she brought them. She didn't even bring them the watch. Like, how did the watch come into play?
Wait a minute. We're getting too far into it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah. So
I got so much stuff to say.
Right. So
First of all,
they're zipping along. Right. Sorry.
They're zipping along. Okay. And I kind of liked it. This whole montage of her being the security officer where 99% of the time you're just following up with complaints. I liked it.
Yeah.
They did this in the third Abrams Star Trek movie where the third one? Yeah, the third one, where he's kind of you get a glimpse of the mundane aspect of being on a starship, which is fun for me. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
I like seeing the day-to-day. I've said this before about Star Trek. Like, I like seeing it. They do it a lot in Voyager.
Right. Oh, yeah. Of course.
Yeah. And you love Voyager.
I do. Well, I was going to say that's why you love Voyager so much. No, I said I realized that all in my head, so I decided not to vocalize it until.
Yeah, it's a podcast,
right?
So
I need to vocalize everything in my head. Right.
Can't all go in the show notes. So I liked seeing Carol Kane. I was like, oh, maybe she's going to play a role, and she did. And I think everything in this little opening, with the exception of Spock, but Spock kind of played a role. But anyway, like they kind of used it. So she's sparring with the Doctor, and the Doctor, until I guess we just found out today that, or in this episode, that he was a ninja.
Oh, yeah.
And if he really is a ninja, if he's like a secret ninja who studied to become a doctor later, because the job market wasn't great for ninjas,
right.
It would be the best show ever created. Come on.
Well, yeah, like at some point he's going to get stranded on a planet with someone. And they're going to be like, so how did you wind up becoming a doctor?
It's going to be great.
Yeah, and he's like, I decided to start saving lives instead of killing them. They're like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Right?
But more on that later.
You had my interest. Now you have my attention.
But I feel like probably what happened is they needed her to be sparring with someone, and he was the most appropriate choice. And so he is now a ninja in the canon of the show. But that's not the most interesting part of what happened in this. Not the cold. Was the cold open? I don't know. I don't even know if they have cold opens anymore.
And then there
was that time cop happened. I got what I wanted.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Of the
Voyager time cops. I think this is the same society or organization or whatever from the future that was in that Voyager episode that I love, that I want there to be an entire show based on. And I'm hoping that everyone's going to love this idea. They're going to be so intrigued by the notion that we're being watched over by some sort of time cops from the future.
I mean, we talked about it like 2 years ago, and it is just such a good idea because it allows them to fill in all of the nerdy canon plot holes of every episode. And they have the technology. They've had it since Trials and Tribulations where they can insert these characters into these episodes. And the budget would be on the special effects, but it kind of already is. But it wouldn't have as long of episode runtimes as far as filming goes because they would be able to insert scenes from other episodes. Why have they not done this, Paul?
Yeah, I don't know. It seems like such an interesting way to explore the Star Trek universe, because they could spend some time in the future that hasn't happened in the Star Trek universe, and also some of the time with Next Gen, some of the time. Because, you don't have to, you can do the thing that they did in Voyager where there's an episode where they send Seven of Nine back in time to when, like the Caretaker episode, basically. Right. And she's walking around, and you don't have to have her interact with the crew when they're young in every scene. You just have one scene or maybe two where she does that just for the sake of fun. So I need to look up if it actually is the same name that they use in Voyager.
Right.
I think it is. They're wearing different outfits. They're wearing like Gap outfits.
Sure, but I mean that's par for the course for all the new series.
That's true. It's pretty cool. I liked the Gap outfit.
Yeah. So anyway, you jumped from the beginning to the very end.
No, this is when like somebody shows up.
Oh, I thought he
you're
was
right.
he was in 2020 clothing. He wasn't in.
He in the same Gap sweater that the lady in the very end.
Oh, really? No. See, I saw him in a blazer. I didn't realize that he was. I wasn't paying attention
Well,
to the
it was
outfit.
fall in the future.
Right.
But
Lying there
I
dying,
think,
holding his pumpkin spice latte.
What's the little stick that goes in the sippy cup area of the coffee? There's a name for that.
I mean, I think it's just called a stopper, but
Is it called a stopper?
that's what I hear it. Or yeah, as a stopper.
Anyway, so we get the impression. I mean, I knew exactly what was happening from content or from previous, from Time Cop.
Right.
He was obviously from the future, or something was happening, or I guess because I read the blurb. I don't know if I would have known otherwise what was happening, but I was like, yes, we're getting into it. This is happening.
Well, the moment he gives her that little trinket that just has a single button on it, and
and looks like it's from the original series.
well, yes, and that may have been the point, because I mean, since we are dealing with a couple years before, they're trying to plus up without advancing the technology. So yes, like I could easily just see it being a single button where it's red to green. Okay, that means we're good. But he gives her some kind of future device, and he's got a bullet wound, and she's like, that's not a phaser, that's a bullet. Like, you're like, okay, there's time travel involved, even if you haven't read the blurb.
But would you? I don't know about that. I guess when he has a bullet wound, then you're like, oh, that's curious. Is it time travel? But I feel like they ruined that reveal with the blurb and the fact that it's time travel and all of the ads.
Right. Well, and then they did the time cop wipe, which was cool.
Yeah, worked great. I knew exactly what was happening.
I wonder if there's anybody at this point who wouldn't know.
Time cop.
Just if you saw that wipe and the background is just marginally different, like, is there anyone out there who would be like, wait, what happened?
I would pay serious money to have that kind of obliviousness.
Right.
Because that means that you have no idea what's going on and aren't really, but then you wouldn't be a fan. You wouldn't be watching the show, right?
Well, yeah, but it might be like somebody loved this episode and they wanted to introduce somebody to, but you also would have to be completely oblivious to sci-fi.
Right. I mean, because it is a trope.
It is.
Right. It is definitely a trope where it kind of washes over. I am waiting, I'm glad you said we're in Star Trope because it does feel like both Picard and Strange New Worlds, they're kind of leaning on tropes that are familiar to get us from point A to point B, and which we don't need. Your Star Trek audience is smarter than your average audience, I would argue.
Sure, I would agree with that.
So I don't think you need all of those tropes, like you were saying. Do something more creative that doesn't necessarily spell it out.
Yes, and one of the things that we enjoy about Star Trek in general is that they either take that trope, and subvert it, or they just don't go in the trope direction, and this episode just leaned very heavily into the tropes.
Yeah, I didn't like it.
No.
I didn't like it. But we're not there yet. We're not to the part that I didn't like yet because I was still liking it
Right.
at this point in the show.
Yeah.
So she shows up on the bridge and it's Kirk, but everybody else is the same.
Yep. Because, why not? It would have been amazing if they had the alien from Star Trek the Animated Series, the long neck one. I wish I could remember his name or what race he was. But when they took Chekhov off the bridge, they replaced him with this kind of orangish brown, long-necked alien.
Yeah, and the thing about it is we learn down the road that this is not just a random flip of captain somewhere, that the Earth's history is totally different.
Totally different, yeah.
And so everybody's path, their vector, their time vector, or whatever you want to call it, would be totally different. So the idea that randomly all these people showed up in this entirely different universe felt a little like, why put them, like, at least put them in different jobs.
Sure.
Right?
Right. That would have been fun.
I guess maybe they're saying something about fate, that people are fated to do something or something like that. But put a different, maybe put Carol Kane somewhere. I don't know. It just felt like it felt a little too convenient, and I felt like they were trying very hard to get the hell out of the future. That's what it seemed.
Well, yeah, and
that's get the hell back to the past.
Right, and that's the other part of it too. Since they didn't spend a whole lot of time on the bridge, they could have put anybody there. Mm-hmm. Like it didn't have
any lines. There were no lines.
Yeah, they all just looked at her awkwardly. Right.
Right. It felt very much like they were rushing us out, like scooting us out, like brushing us out with a broom.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I did like the moment that Kirk had, though. You know, he says something like, not to be rude, but who the hell are you?
Yeah. And I think their uniform was different. Although familiar, they should have been like, that's an interesting uniform.
Yeah.
You know, because they had different comm badges. Mm-hmm. It was like a diamond shape. Yeah. So what I missed the most, and I was hoping this would happen, was spend a little bit more time on this alternate universe.
Absolutely.
You know, have her kind of sneak around a little bit, find out that things are slightly different. Maybe she just tries to go back to work and doesn't really know what just happened.
Right.
And she slowly figures out, kind of like Parallels in the Next Gen episode, where things are changing a little differently. And it's like, oh, that's weird. That's not always been there.
Right.
You know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I guess maybe they didn't want to invoke that because I immediately thought of Parallels when it started happening. So I guess that was a good call. But something like that, where it culminates on the bridge where it's like, oh, it's not Pike, it's somebody else. And then I missed the Geordi Data Teller scene where they theorize what's happening with this person, right? And they try and help her as opposed to immediately her being a potential enemy.
Right, an anemone, for the dolphins, yeah.
Keep her away from the dolphins at all cost.
I mean, they kind of did it, but it wasn't that she was an enemy. He was like, you have to understand it from my point of view. You know, like you just randomly show up and we don't know anything about this device. But what I didn't like was she, you know, kind of like what Spock did in the first episode, where she's like, he gave me this thing and he had a bullet wound. So I have to believe that he came from the past and he wanted me to bring you along with me. And this button is going to get us back there. Yeah.
And the whole button thing where they travel back into time, right?
Well, yes, but they do it in, I can't even say it, in a very trope fashion where they're arguing over the button and it gets pushed and now they're back, you know, and one of them is like, that's not even what I wanted. What?
Well, I was expecting there to be a fight, right? Like she doesn't give it to him and he grabs for it and she throws him to the ground because he's like, I've been waiting to use that. I just learned that. But she uses it later. So they pay it off later, just not with him.
Right.
But yeah, they argue in his ready room and there's no scientific theorization. It's just and so then they just argue over it and then they magically go back to the 21st century in Toronto.
Right.
Because that must be where they shoot the show. It actually looked a little bit like LA. I couldn't tell.
Well, and he even says, you know, it's like New York City or something like that. And she's like, what are you, daft? It's Toronto, clearly.
Right. I recognize mediocrity anywhere.
And everyone here's so nice.
I like that in the future, that the Canadian trope of everyone being nice still maintains.
Right.
Like that.
Of course.
They land in the 21st century and they start fighting again over the button device. And do you think the captain of a starship, upon being transported to an unknown location, and probably figured out pretty quickly it was an unknown time as well, right? That he would just start banging on the device like an 8-month-old to get it to work? Like,
right? Yeah, like Ziggy.
Yeah, he's like knocking it against the head. Like he needed a cigar in his hand too, right? It just felt very...
I mean, at that point, like it kind of feels kind of Zap Brannigan, where he's been hitting it for a little while and he's like, well, it doesn't work, and just tosses it to the side, you know?
It was at this point that I kind of realized, or started to kind of seep in to my brain, that this is not going to be what I want. This is not going to be a very quickly paced, we need to figure out what's going on. We need to find what we need to find who we need to find, whatever, get to the threat and get it done. that it's going to be a very slowly paced, fish out of water, kind of a romantic comedy almost immediately, because she's kind of checking him out when he's changing clothes. And
oh my gosh, I didn't even
oh,
think about that until you said that.
yeah.
But yeah, you're right.
I was like, oh no.
No.
Yeah. I automatically said that when they walked into the clothes store. I was like, oh no. That's when I said to myself, okay, you get one of these episode, Strange
Right.
New Worlds, one, and that's it. And then they kind of only did that once.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I did like that they kind of said never again. So we need to find money. And I forget what her suggestion was, but he was like, give me a few minutes. And then he just schooled everybody during the chess games. And he kind of comments about how, like, when it's 2-dimensional, it's basically for toddlers.
Yeah. I would have loved it if at the end of this long chess montage that he's only netted $5.50.
Right.
Okay, then they sleep in this super luxurious hotel, which I guess they're not willing to slum it after having lived on the Enterprise, right? They're just in a really nice hotel.
Right. Well,
It's got a fireplace.
yeah, it's a really nice hotel. And it's also like, how much money did he make, first off? And second off,
Can't have been that much.
well, yeah, even if it was like a decent amount, why would you blow it? Like, you need a place to sleep. You don't need a place of luxury.
Yeah, just get a Motel 6 and call it a day.
Right.
You know? They don't explain. There must have been a cutscene that explained why they decided to take that, like the penthouse, whatever, you know.
Yeah. I
and
mean,
they-
it is
they
just to
witness-
show like
yeah.
how much money he did bank. But
Wasn't that much cash? Like, how much money can you make in what I saw as like a couple of hours tops? So, I mean,
Right.
chess games can be long, unless he was just whooping their ass the whole time.
yeah, but I mean, realistically, like, even if it was a couple hours and he was making $5 or $10 each game, well, no, even there, like, you're probably not going to make a whole lot of money because the games are probably going to last a while, unless he is so good.
Well, that's the thing. Maybe he was beating them in 2 or 3, 4 or 5 moves.
Right.
But see, people aren't coming. Like, I feel like the montage they needed the montage to be long to indicate that he was there for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
But then every single person, you had to show them being beaten and them turning over the
Right.
The king. It's like we just need to see the bunch of different kings being flipped over by different hands, right?
Well, see, and even there, like, editing wise, you don't really need to see it. Like, yes, it's fun to. Well, it wasn't even fun. Like, it's
The pop song. It just felt very un-Star Trek.
It could have been a hard cut, you know, like, he's like, hang on, and he sees the chessboard and he's like, I've got an idea. And he starts walking toward it, immediately cut to them walking towards the hot dog stand with him counting out his bankroll.
Right. Yeah. Would have been fine. We would have gotten it.
Yep.
We would have understood.
Yeah. But they didn't.
So they didn't do that. So they see the shot, or they see the bridge explode, right? And they have a front row seat to the bridge exploding,
Yeah.
to the point where all of those windows would be exploded, right? There's no way that any building would survive, that their windows would survive that kind of explosion. But that didn't happen. So they're like, oh, this doesn't look right.
Well, but
This
both of
probably
them
doesn't
remembered
happen
it
every day.
So this was clearly like a point in history, which I thought was kind of a neat thing, because they were sitting there trying to talk about, like, we need to find the discrepancies in our history.
I guess the idea was that the eugenics war didn't happen, or it did happen, but they lost, right? Earth lost afterward. I don't know. They didn't go into it. I guess they didn't need to.
They were talking about how in Kirk's timeline, the cold fusion reactor exploded, and I have to believe that it took out all of the augments since they were right there with the fusion reactor. And so the eugenics war never happened, which caused the Earth to come together and create the peaceful utopia that it was.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, again, this should have been 2 or 3 episodes. I was actually expecting it to be, because so little was happening. We got to the halfway point, and is something going to happen? Are they going to go do something at a certain point? Like, what's going on? And then the bridge explodes. It's like, okay, finally, let's move this shit along here. And it kind of had that moment, and then it slowed down again. And then they go to the thing, and they see the picture. They see the wreckage, and then they decide to follow the evidence, right? Mm-hmm. They're cleaning up the evidence, which didn't make sense, because I was unclear. It was very unclear on who was in the van after we learned the big reveal that the the crazy alien chasing person was the Romulan. Who were those people then?
Well, and why did they take it?
Yeah, where were they taking it to?
Right.
And they obviously were running. It wasn't as just they knew that they were being followed and they were running away.
Right.
So that was sort of a dropped storyline.
Okay, so hang on. Let's see if we can put it together. So they blew up the bridge because they were trying to prevent the world from coming together. That's kind of what the Romulan said at the end. So they knew that the bridge was going to be blown up. So maybe they were taking the piece that didn't line up with the technology at the time.
Well, that's what they said. But who? Because she didn't. The Romulan did not blow up the bridge. She said that was small potatoes. Like, what are they doing? Right? So who were these other people?
Oh, I thought it was her. Like I assumed that it was her blowing up the bridge, and she was saying like, that's just, yeah, those are small things to what our real goal is, but we're still doing it.
And was it we, or was she I mean, she obviously wasn't a member of these people, because why? Maybe it was. Maybe she was in the van.
No, you're right.
It was very unclear of who those people were in the van and why they were running away.
So the Romulan couldn't get into this center. Oh. Okay, so her goal was to... No, isn't the cold fusion reactor the Romulan thing?
The cold fusion reactor was in that building.
I know, but
they don't go to that. They go to wherever they're housing Khan. And why is he in the same building as Khan? I guess because he's an augment, and they're doing augment types of experiments with these kids who are all augments, and he grows up to be...
Maybe they
Ricardo
took her
Montalban?
ship? And that's why the cold fusion reactor and the augments are in the same place?
Yeah, it felt very like there was something missing. Almost like they had another episode that they pulled all this from.
I feel like I'm going to have to rewatch this episode to try to piece together. Because yes, the Romulan was like, they say that the Romulan was the one who was impacting the timeline, because she said like the eugenics war was supposed to happen in 1992, but now it's 30 years later. So she's already impacted the timeline. So I think like the implication was that with La'an stopping the Romulan from killing Khan, which, wait a minute, how did she do? Because the cold fusion reactor would still blow up, because they were talking about how the tertium or whatever has a really short half-life, and it runs the cold fusion reactor. And so when it burns out, the cold fusion reactor is going to blow up.
That's why it was a MacGuffin, because if this were a Star Trek episode, they would have built a thing, right? Mm-hmm. And they would have had Carol Kane not be just an idiot, and they would have said, "Oh, I guess I saw this, 2,000 years ago once on another planet. I think you can do it with this." Mm-hmm. Instead of, they just used a watch. They spent so much time on this watch where they could have done something more interesting, where they're like building, like, remember the episode, I forgot what it was, where Data and everybody goes back in time to San Francisco in like the early 1900s or late 1900s or early
it's time
20th
zero.
century.
Yeah.
And he builds like this cool thing to like communicate with somebody. I don't even remember what he was building, but
so
like, where's that?
So
where is that?
That would be the trope subversion. If Kirk and La'an were talking about that, and they were like, we need these, we need to build a device that will help us detect where the tritium is. And they were like, we need this, and this. And they start to put those things together. And then Palea like comes down after having a drink or having a nap or whatever. And she's like, what are you guys doing? And they're like, we're building a device to detect tritium. And she's like, oh, deep sea diver watches do the same thing. I've got a dead one right over here.
Yeah, maybe.
No, you don't like that?
I don't like it because it requires sort of a Deus Ex Machina thing to just like, oh, here's this thing that magically does what you need it to do without any work, right?
But here's I don't know if it's
work.
magic or not. Like, I don't know if tritium is a thing, and I don't know if like that's actually how the watches work, and I don't know if like finding it in the air, that's how it would work as well.
Well, that's the magic, is there's no way they could just walk around Toronto and the thing is glowing, so that we must be here, right? They would have to they basically would have to go back and forth and
literally comb Toronto. Right.
Yeah. So that's magical in that sense. They walked for 2.5 steps, kissed, and then like, oh, here it is, right?
Yeah.
So I wanted it to be a little bit more science fiction-y,
Or it starts glowing
kissy,
right
kissy.
there. She's like, yeah, this watch has been dead forever. And they take the face off and it starts glowing. And they turn to Palea and she's like, so I have a cold fusion reactor. So?
Yeah.
Oh, that's what you guys were talking
nice.
about.
That'd have been nice. Or have her do something.
Have her be
fun
more
and
than,
interesting.
just this random cameo Easter egg type thing. Yeah.
It does feel like it's just a cameo at this point. You're right. It does feel like they brought her in for an afternoon because she's Carol Kane,
Well, and then, sorry, I know I do want to keep talking about the rest of the episode, but then even to like skip ahead where they're randomly talking to her about these ancient pieces of art that she still has stored away. And it's just like a conversation that Pike is having with her. It was just such a weird way to acknowledge that La'an is kind of like doing her a solid.
And this happens a lot in time travel movies and TV shows, etc., where you meet someone in the past and then you fast forward to the future. That same character is in the future with the older version of the person that they met. And it hasn't really been, there's not been a single example of somebody or that I've been exposed to where somebody says, "Hey, you look familiar. How do I know you?" Like what? And granted, with her, it's been hundreds of years, so maybe that would get lost in the hundreds of years that she spent. I don't know. That would have been fun. Have you like, "Hey, I guess the watch worked, right? That's all you need." That
Right.
line, and then Pike's like, "What do you mean?"
Well, yeah, and that's like maybe have her be somebody who likes to document her history, and she takes a picture with them. So she has a picture showing her La'an because it's been several hundred years. Like, there's no way she's going to remember that exact moment with those exact people.
Right.
Yeah,
Let there be some reason why that would be a memorable moment
Yeah.
for her.
Yeah.
Or encounter. Yeah. Anyway, we're jumping ahead, dude.
I know. Sorry. So
I want to get into the stuff that I don't care about. So Kirk is doing another fish out of water thing where he's trying to drive the car. Right?
Oh,
It's
okay.
like,
Okay. Backing up a little bit to that. Okay.
And they miss an opportunity. They miss an opportunity for comedy because there's a point where he like runs into the car behind him and he stops and he turns and looks at La'an. La'an's looking at him, kind of annoyed. And then they cut and they're finally driving.
Right.
She should have been driving, right? They pan
Yes.
up. They
That's
tilt
actually
up,
what I
and
thought
he's-
was going to happen. Yes.
That's what I thought was going to happen too. It's the perfect moment.
Yep.
Because he doesn't have to be driving. Like it makes like even when they get stopped by the cops, that gets resolved very, very easily. He doesn't have to be the one, right?
Right.
So why didn't they do that?
Yep. Just a great
That would
little.
have been funny.
Yep.
So anyway, my thing about Carol Kane, going back a little bit, is that they should have gotten to her in the first 15 minutes of the show in the past, right? That should have been something that they immediately remembered.
Yes.
and
I
went
know
and
someone
did,
back here. Yep. Who can actually help us.
right?
Yeah.
Who is an engineer.
Well, and if nothing, I mean, even if they did play it out the exact same way, she's just a hoarder and she has all these random tchotchkes, she would still know Vermont and Toronto. Like she would know the areas to help them.
Right. And she obviously has a ship or came on a ship,
Right.
right? Because she's an alien. So she would be exposed to technology that was advanced from Earth in that timeline.
Yeah.
So
yeah, she should have been the place that they went to for sleep, for money, for resources. Yeah.
but they didn't do that.
But they didn't do that.
Yeah. I just got bored with it. And then it's revealed that the crazy person that they meet with the camera is a Romulan, and she's been stuck there since 1992 or something like that. And I feel like you can't blow up the world or planet in that much time. Like you can't really do that kind of. I mean, I guess Romulans were slowing the progress of humans because they become so bothersome in the past or in the future.
Right.
But really, you can't. Like, I feel like I could go wreak some havoc on planet Earth.
Right. Well, and I guess it also doesn't need to be explained, but how did she get there? Is she from like the 31st century?
I think she's from the future, at least.
From the future.
Or which future she's from? Is she from Kirk's future or from La'an's future?
Right.
Because La'an's, or rather Kirk's future, is created from the first time cop failing at his mission, right?
Yeah.
So I guess it's a causality problem.
Well, and it would have been nice to see how that played out as well. Like, how did he get? It would have been fun if, in the travels of Kirk and La'an, they run into the guy who went back to La'an.
That's true, because they should have. I'm guessing when Kirk got shot in the same spot as the time cop, I thought that that Kirk had just taken the place of the time cop and things were repeating themselves. But shouldn't there be, just like there's another Marty in 1955, shouldn't there be another one of those guys that eventually, that would have been fun.
Yeah.
Why don't they do that? where they had to see the guy and they're like, no, you can't do that because we have to let him die, because if he doesn't die, we're going to disappear and you're going to disappear.
Right.
And that's the dilemma, right? That's the ethical dilemma or the moral dilemma. Is like, no, we have to let him die. Otherwise you're going to disappear. And I love you now. Because I saw you with your shirt off.
Right. I mean, going to that, I did feel like that was the moral dilemma that La'an faced, but we didn't really see that until the end. You know, when
what was the dilemma?
The fact that she had to protect this mass murderer. It wasn't a dilemma where they like discussed it or debated it, but it was a dilemma insofar as it tore her up inside at the end.
I think that was already on rails, though. She knew that if she killed Khan, that she would be killing herself, first of all, and also that she saw what happens when he is dead. So, and I don't know how the Romulan knew that by killing Khan, it's just a lot of loose ends. It just doesn't feel like, why would the Romulan know that? And plus the Romulan, that wasn't even the original mission. The original mission was to destroy the cold fusion device. She's like, no, we got to use a scalpel now. And then she decides to kill Khan instead. Like, why was that? Was that always the plan B, or was that an improvisation? And how did she know that killing Khan would have any effect on the future? And how did she know it wouldn't have a greater effect on the future, making humans even more bothersome?
Well, and if the cold fusion reactor is what wound up killing Khan, and so the eugenics war never happened, then why kill Khan? Like, why not just let the timeline play out where the cold fusion reactor explodes?
I don't know. They didn't go into this.
Yeah.
Because it's a MacGuffin. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Because she loves Kirk now. By the way, I mean, I know it is technically a different person, but he's kind of the same person in terms of Kirk.
Yeah.
Because she calls Kirk and she just kind of wants to see Kirk again because she loves Kirk now.
Mm-hmm. I think it was a little bit of like, I watched you die, so it's just nice to see you alive.
Her crying thing made it seem like, oh, I miss this other
I know,
Kirk.
like I love you and you can never know. Yeah.
Right, exactly. But can he? Like, Kirk's not married.
No,
Right? And he asked her out on a date like that at that moment. Like, she got exactly what she, like, in terms of best case scenario, that was it.
Yeah.
So I don't know what she was crying about. She's a crybaby. God. Do you think the watch is going to play some element? Because that was the last shot of the show.
Oh, I know. And like it had this huge ominous music playing over it.
Yeah. I feel like it's going to play something. Like she's screwed something up.
I hope so.
Like she's got a dick now or something.
I feel like she would have noticed. I mean, maybe not. But yeah, just the way the episode ended, how it like kind of pans down and refocuses on the watch, and the music music swells. It full on swells. And then it just cuts off.
I wanted the watch to start laughing.
Well, I expected a hand to take the watch or the watch to disappear or something. It was
something was going to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, that's could be the most interesting part of this episode. Is like, oh, now we have some kind of thing that is going to cause problems.
But it's like the Next
show.
Generation conspiracy episode, you know, where they kill the bug, the torso bug, and then they're like at the very end, they're like, it was a distress signal calling out. You know, it's like, oh man, what's that going to lead to? Nothing.
Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
Same thing with the Night Terror episode.
Right.
Where they're being kidnapped by the aliens,
Yep.
and it's a super creepy, awesome episode. They're watching us. That's like the most ominous ending for a Next Gen episode, even more than the conspiracy one.
Yeah. Or even the Nagilum
like
episode, you know, where
Yeah.
they're like, they agree to disagree and be fascinating creatures, and they go on their merry ways, despite the fact that this creature is completely omnipotent.
We'll put a buoy out. No one will come near.
Right.
And that will be the end of that.
Right.
Buoys solve everything. Just like boobies. Buoys and boobies.
That's the Star Trek series.
Buoys and boobies?
Yeah. All right.
Well, is this a Star Trek episode?
So that's the thing. Like there were too many heavy tropes that didn't have to be tropes, and I was totally fine. I didn't do the research, but I was totally fine with the tertarium explanation for the watch. I thought the way that they handled it was wrong, and the moral dilemma.
So boring.
Right. But again, it doesn't matter whether or not we liked it; it's whether or not it's there. And the moral dilemma being presented at the end of the episode with her just being like super distraught. But the tropes were so heavy that, again, the first and the third, it doesn't matter whether or not we argue if it's there. Like the second one, it was not presented in a unique or novel fashion. So again, not Star Trek. Now, me personally, I enjoyed this episode because I did enjoy the character moments, which is so funny. Like between the two of us, how like I enjoy the day-to-day stuff as well, but I like when I'm invested in the characters, I want to see more with the characters. And like you couldn't give two shits about that. Like give you the technology and how it all runs and let them like play in it all day and you're happy.
Yeah, they can talk about themselves and their feelings
Off camera.
on the way to engineering or
Right.
to the holodeck. From the bridge to engineering, that's as much time as they get. That's it. That's all.
Yeah.
Otherwise it's boring.
Yeah.
By the way, so what I want from now on, this would actually redeem this episode for me, is if every time La'an sees Kirk, she just bursts into terrible, like she starts sobbing uncontrollably.
I think that she like should play like a schoolgirl, you know, every time she sees him. She's like, oh, I don't know. What do you think?
Oh, that would be so, no, that would not redeem. No, unredeem.
And then run around the corner and start crying.
No, I just want, anytime there's a picture of him or even mentioned, uncontrollable sobbing.
Anytime she sees Sam, which again, missed opportunity. Sam absolutely should have been the actor who plays Jim with a mustache because that's who. Because that's William Shatner played his brother in the episode where he died.
Right. But later it is revealed that
He takes off a
Kirk
mask.
was always playing Sam. That he liked this idea, this idea that he could have a brother. But it was never Sam. There was never a Sam. It was always Kirk.
Right.
It opens up all the. It's like the Superman in Superman 3, no 4. You know the scene with Lois Lane and the other. What's her name? The other person.
Oh,
The
Lana?
daughter of the. No, not Lana. Though that's from 3. I'm talking about 4. The one where he's like having lunch as Superman and Clark Kent. And he has to keep like transitioning and like flying back up to the thing.
Right.
I thought you were a Superman fan.
I am, and that's why I don't know what you're talking about. Because
Such a dick.
there were 2.5 movies.
What was the other half?
Well,
What was the half one?
most of 3. Anything that didn't have Richard Pryor.
Okay, got it.
Cool. Well, I've been Jonathan.
You don't remember what I'm talking about?
No, I do
Or,
remember what you're talking about.
He has to have lunch, and then he has to like pretend to burn the roast. Like, who makes a roast
For lunch, right? Who like is making the roast for lunch? Yeah,
Would you wake up at like 3 a.m. start making the ginormous?
gotta get ready for
turkey?
lunch. But no, I do remember the moment you're talking about. I just don't remember the character's name. And that's what you were trying to figure out, and I can't help you.
Yeah, what is her? It's like it doesn't matter. And I've been Paul.
And this has been the measure of an episode.
Oh, what show are we watching next? Oh, Picard. Picard. But you already knew that. Little spoiler for next time.